A little jumpy up here. It did sound like gunfire. And we're still hearing firecrackers going off, too. They're illegal. You can get fined a lot of money for that. Welcome to the City Council meeting tonight. We're at the Council Chambers, City Hall, 10 West State Street. It's July 22, 2019. The time is 5:30 p.m. Notice to public, the Mayor and City Council welcome comment from the public during discussion of any of the agenda items. You're required to step to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, limit your time used to 3 minutes so that others may also speak. All speakers shall speak clearly, direct comments to the Mayor and City Council and not to any councilors specifically. It's at the discretion of the Mayor and the Council to respond to specific questions and comments or to have staff respond during the meeting. We've now been called to order. Let's, those who are able, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Go.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please call the roll.
Lamer.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Weirin. Here. Cahill's absent. Gowdy.
Here.
Hoop.
Here.
Isom.
Here.
Sue Cahill is at a conference and couldn't be here tonight. And it's now time for Mayor, Council, and Administrator comments. Any of the councilors wish to comment? Jessica?
Yes, I wanted to introduce Casey Byers. He has an award to present us with, which I'll let him talk a little bit more about.
Thank you. Casey Byers, landscape architect with Bolton and Mink. I was the project manager on the Highway 14 corridor study that we completed last year for the city. We submitted this project for a Central States ASLA award, which is the American Society of Landscape Architects. This is the regional chapter, so it's Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska. There's I think 6 or 8 different states as part of that organization. This was submitted as part of the planning and analysis category for the awards and was selected 1 out of I think 70 submittals for the awards. So this is a great honor for the city. We accepted the award on the city's behalf back in April at an awards luncheon in St. Louis. So I wanted to present the award to the city of Marshalltown for the completion of that study. So
Thank you very much. Very good. Way to go. Really.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And still in this category, I'd like to say it was one heck of a week last week with the anniversary of the tornado. I went from the hospital at the ER where there was an award given to an 11-year-old child who saved her little 2-week-old sister who wasn't breathing, to the playground at Woodbury where they were hoping to have 100 people, maybe 200. Well, 317 people showed up, and they completed the playground rebuild 2 hours faster than they thought they would. And then the Times Republican hosted the party on Friday night, honoring 5 of the really big heroes here for our tornado recovery. And I think I know I had my 66th interview with media who have been really good to keep us in the forefront, and people keep contributing. And the governor came up for that event on Friday night. So it was, I forgot about J.P. Howard's birthday last night. That was kind of fun too. He's 70 years old, and they're going back up to the Mayo Clinic for help this week. It was quite a week, and I'm exhausted and glad to have the anniversary over.
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
The week prior to that, we had the county fair here and can a grandpa kind of brag a little
You
bit?
can, please do.
My granddaughter was picked as queen for the fair, so she now, next week she goes and represents Marshall County in the 10-county queen contest, and then she spends 4 days at the state fair.
Wow.
So we're pretty proud of her.
We knew she was showing livestock, but I didn't know about the
Yes.
fair queen. That's cool. Thank you, Leon. Anybody else have any comments up here?
Well, we also had that ice cream social.
Oh, we did. I forgot
It
about
was
that.
pretty warm out there, but it was a lot of fun.
And
really
the art
great.
fair.
Yeah,
And the art fair. Yeah, it was a
it was
really
a good weekend. Yeah.
power-packed weekend. Your kids were enjoying the games out there at the art
Yeah.
fair too. That was fun to see.
Yep, it was good.
Very good. Okay. Do we have any years of service presentations?
Not here.
No, not here. Okay. All right. Let's go on to the consent agenda then. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move for approval.
Second.
Tie goes to Isom on this one. Roll call.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please read those items.
Approve the minutes for July 8 and the bill list of $1,832,156.31. Approve the May financial statements. Reappoint Maureen Lyon to the Library Board. Karen Shipley Cooper to the Housing Appeals Board. Meryl Price, Solid Waste Commission. And accept the resignation of Julie Squires for the Fisher Center Board. And also receipt of the Board and Commission members' vacancy list. Resolution transferring funds for fiscal year 2018-2019. Resolution declaring certain property surplus and authorizing sale and disposal of a 1978 case backhoe and a hydraulic paving breaker. Resolution approving quote and award to Hay Construction Services for the installation of the City Hall West Annex Wall in the amount of $71,845. Resolution approving amended engineering services agreement for the 2014 sanitary sewer rehabilitation project, an increase of $14,303. Resolution authorizing the purchase of a Falcon asphalt recycler and hot box trailer for the street department for the price of $32,375. Resolution approving quote and award to Ciro Dioro Masonry and Landscaping for the repair of the salt storage building project in the amount of $99,090. Resolution approving quote and award to Clearspan Fabric Structures International for the salt storage build and repair project in the amount of $92,950. Resolution approving engineer statement of completion and accepting the Iowa River Trail Phase 3 with final project cost of $224,671.20. And resolution approving contract change order number 1 for the Iowa River Trail Phase 3 project for a decrease of $20,666.65. Renewal liquor licenses, Walmart Supercenter, Casey's General Store on 108 Iowa Avenue West, Calvin Rocket, La Raza Taco Shop, and Totem Bowl.
Thank you. I see the Ciro Delorio banners are up at the House of Compassion as well, so that's getting repaired too. It's fun to see that get back up in operation. We're now on to item G, resolutions, and the first one is to be read by the clerk.
Resolution approving the creation of a full-time transit operations assistant 2 in fiscal year 2019.
Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Comment.
Good evening, Justin Nickel, Public Works Director. I looked back, I think it was in January, we last had a discussion about transit staffing. We are here with a vacancy again. The current vacancy is a part-time transit operations assistant. In analyzing our budget and the needs and the continued overtime hours that we continue to drive, we are here to ask the council for the approval for a full-time transit operations assistant. So this would really be primarily clerical work, answering the phone, helping with routes and assignments. But we also would be looking for somebody with a CDL so they could assist with driving to try and help our overtime situation. thanks to our newly minted transit administrator, we do have about 150 to 200,000 extra dollars in our budget this year. He has been excellent and diligent in reviewing our ridership and our information that goes to both the Iowa DOT and the Federal Transit Federal Transit Administration, and had found some more money. So we are here asking for the council's approval to create a full-time position for the operations assistant. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the council? Any comment from the public? Roll call.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes. Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Thanks, Justin. Carried. Madam Clerk, please read resolution number 2.
Tentative resolution providing for the conveyance and transfer of title to the property at 108 North 7th Avenue from the city to Dan Oswald.
Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Any comment?
Yeah, just to remind you, this was one thing that we discussed at our last meeting, and I will say this was not the bidder that we anticipated, and so I was rather surprised that we did get a bid. I think it was for $520. It's over 500, and so as I had mentioned before, this is a lot that has no use to us. We've been paying to mow it, and so this will allow us to get it back on the tax rolls, and I believe eventually his goal is to build a home on that property.
Great. We need more homes. Any other comment by councilors or the public? Roll call, please.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Carried. Very good. When you get a chance, please read number 3.
Tentative resolution providing for the conveyance and transfer of title to the property at 707 South 4th Street from the city to the Marshalltown Waterworks.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
This one just kind of also sprung up. There's a property that we actually own on South 4th Street that was acquired when the viaduct was actually built for 3rd Street, 6th Street. And so there is a large water main that runs directly through this property, so it's not one that can be developed. Waterworks is interested in it to basically install a bulk water purchase station rather than having individuals come out to the plant while the bridges are out. So this sort of made sense that it has no use to us, and they've been mowing it. So the sales price is $1 because they are another governmental entity.
Any comments or questions about that?
I guess I wonder why we're doing it. It's still going to be, the property will still be in the city of Marshalltown's name.
There are
With a parentheses after waterworks, so all the property they own is in the city of Marshalltown's name anyway, so whatever.
This was something that we felt was probably the best thing to just convey it. Yeah, ultimately, you are correct that they are a board that's created by the city, but we thought for these purposes, it makes sense that it's in their name so it doesn't ever come up as being something that could be a property that we could sell or be developable, because it really cannot be built upon.
Still be in your name.
Other comments or questions or public comment?
Waste of money.
Roll call.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Very good. Carried. Please read resolution number 4.
Resolution to approve federal grant agreement to construct T-Hangar Phase 1 for the Marshalltown Airport project.
Is there a motion to approve?
So
moved.
move, Your Honor.
I'll give that one to Martin as the motion, Lamer as the second, and discussion.
Again, Justin Nickel, Public Works Director. I believe it was about 2 months ago, we asked for the council's approval to submit a grant application for funding assistance for the design of a, it says T-hangar, but it's just a hangar. In this case, 120 feet by 100 feet at our airport. We were sent a package last week to notify that we were awarded our request. I think the total comes to $55,800 that the FAA will supply. That's a 90-10 split, so the city would supply roughly $5,000 of that amount. And again, that is just for the engineering work and design that we currently have a contract with Clapsaddle and Garber for. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any?
This is just the hangar, not that terminal thing.
Correct. The FAA is not going to fund the design of the terminal, so this is just for the hangar. And we have separate contracts with CGA to try and keep that money separate so that we don't ever get into a conundrum with the funding of these projects.
And this is the hangar to accommodate the larger planes that could park here overnight instead of having to go to Des Moines or Ankeny or
That's correct,
or
sir.
Newton. Okay.
Could you
Other
state,
questions?
could you state the dimensions of the hangar, please, again?
Yes, 120 feet by 100 feet.
Thank you.
Other consular questions or comments? Any public comment? Roll call, please.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy.
Yes.
Carried as well. Please read item number 5.
We have 2 items relating to the building code and facade grant for 30 East Main Street. Would the council like to consider them together or separately? One is for the building code facade, and one is the building upgrade.
Yeah, same address. I would say let's do both together unless anybody up here objects to that.
No, I move that we handle both.
I'll consider that nobody objected. Let's do both together.
Jenny Etter.
Is there a motion to approve them, though?
So moved.
Bethany just make a motion?
Yeah, she did. Okay. Yeah, we need a second to that motion.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Oh, you want Jenny to discuss it first?
Nope.
Isom,
Yeah, I do. I do.
Lamer. Oh, Martin,
Okay. Yes.
Isom, you are yes. Weirin,
Yes.
Cahill. Oh, Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop.
Yes.
Okay, we've combined the two, and now would be a good time for discussion. Well, actually, we probably need a motion to approve the
What do we do?
resolutions or resolution before discussion.
So I move for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
What did we just do?
Yes, 175 and 177.
Very good. Roll call on, well, no,
176.
let's have discussion first. Jenny?
Jenny Etter, Marshalltown Central Business District, 16 East Main. The Incentive Grant Committee met and are suggesting and recommending the approval of this grant. This is the type of building restoration that we dream of, and this is the type of entrepreneur that we want downtown. Julie Miller is doing a fantastic job of redoing this building inside and out. So her request total is $21,662, but the total amount of the project is $86,000. So she's asking for 25% of that. And just a reminder to you all, this grant, this funding source, the TIF dollars, has investment turnover like nothing else that the city does. And in fact, since 2002, you've only paid 3% of the cost of these buildings. So your investment dollars are spent very well, very wisely on these projects. So I hope that you will continue to support these. If you support this, that leaves us with a total of about $22,000. We have at least 30 other projects that potentially a great share of those will also be asking for money in the future. So I'll be back to talk to you about that. But tonight, I would love your support for this project.
You've told us in the past how many millions of dollars we've had invested in downtown that this facade grant was part of.
Yes,
I hate
you-
to put you
you-
on the spot, but
Well,
what,
since 2002, or 2006, you funded $304,000 in renovation projects. The total investment by the owners has been over 10 million.
wow, thanks.
Nice 3%.
No kidding. Questions for Jenny, or comments, or public comment? Oh, let's vote.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop.
Yes.
Carried. Very good. Thanks,
Thank
Jenny.
you very much.
Madam Clerk, let's go to item number 6.
We have several change orders. There would be 8 of them. No. 10 of them. Would the council like to consider them individually or separately?
We can only hope. Does anybody have an objection to doing it all together? Let's do it. Is there a motion to approve the change orders?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Good evening, Justin Nickel, Public Works Director. Reviewing the summary document that Story sends, which is attached to item number 9, down on the list of our 10 change orders. The majority of these charges are, again, due to our Mason dilemmas. We do have one for about 1,760 that is not contributable out of these changes to the Mason. So as we've discussed in the past, we would hope to recoup these fees. I'm not sure I would get overly optimistic that we will get a 100% return, but the masonry work is about wrapped up at our new building, hoping to move in towards the end of next month. And be happy to try to answer any questions. I don't have a whole lot of the backup documentation. It didn't make it into the packet at my own failure. So be happy to try and answer any questions you have.
For as big a project as it is, none of these figures look all that big.
That would be my assessment, but that might be pressing my luck a little bit.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Justin? Any public comment? Let's vote on this one too.
For the 10 resolutions, Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom.
Yes.
Thank you. That one carried too. It's fun to drive by that building these days. It just is. Let's go on to item H, ordinances, and the first one, please.
There's still a few more.
Oh, I missed one.
Yep.
Sorry.
Number 7.
Thank you, yes.
We have public hearing and a resolution approving plan specifications, form of contract and cost for the water pollution control plant concrete repair Phase 3 project.
Is there, no, we have to open the meeting. I declare the public hearing is open right now. It is 5:53 PM. And are there any written comments that have been received by the clerk?
I have not received any, Your Honor.
Are there any public comments? Seeing nobody rising, it's time for staff review.
Bob Ranson, Superintendent of Water Pollution Control Plant. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for this concrete renovation project. I also have Jim Rasmussen with HR Green here to answer any technical questions that are for somebody more qualified than me to answer. But this is the concrete resurfacing for the original portion of the plant, some of the 1938 concrete. We're going to repair some of the spalling and delaminating concrete. So
Inside the basins, or where you at?
most of it's above the water line. There's a little bit of coating that's going to go on underneath at the bottom of the tanks, but most of it is spalling and deterioration from being above the water line.
Okay, thanks.
A tour of your plant was one of the more interesting ones I did when I got elected as mayor.
Good.
You run a nice plant there. Any other questions or comments? Public comment. I've forgotten if we had a motion and a second. Oh, we have to close the meeting. Sorry, yeah. I do declare the public meeting is closed at 5:55 PM. Is there a motion to approve?
I move for approval, Your Honor.
Second, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Goudy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer.
Yes.
Very good, carried. And now we go to item number 8. Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have a public hearing and a resolution approving plan specifications, form of contract and cost for the Anson Park project.
I declare the public hearing is open at 5:56 PM. Did you receive any comments to the clerk's office?
I have not received any written comments, Your Honor.
Are there any public comments? Staff review.
Casey Byers, landscape architect with Bolton and Mink. This project includes some accessible and all-inclusive play equipment for Anson Park, along with some sidewalks internal to the site. There's a separate project for some pavement improvements along the street, and we're going to be adding some parking in addition to that. So currently there's no sidewalks internal in the park right now, so this is going to be a great improvement for that. And I don't know the figure from the Iowa Valley Leadership Group, but somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 is
That's
being.
where we're still operating at. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have a final figure from them yet.
Yeah, that's being contributed to the rubberized play surfacing that'll go around the inclusive play equipment that's going to be installed.
Questions or comments by the council? By the public? Okay, thank you. I declare the public hearing is closed at 5:57 PM. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Weirin,
Yes.
Goudy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Very good. Carried as well. Now we go to item 8, ordinances. Madam Clerk, what is the first one?
The first one, public hearing and third reading of an ordinance adopting the 2015 building code.
I'll declare the public hearing on this one at 5:57 PM. Did you receive any written comments?
No, Your Honor, no written comments were received by the clerk.
Are there any public comments? Any staff review?
Michelle couldn't be here tonight, and I don't know if Chief Ryerson would have anything he'd want to contribute to this, but this is upgrading the building code. We were currently at 2006 edition, getting us into the 2015, which is the state-adopted code. You will notice that Scott Riemenschneider did go through and noted multiple exceptions, as we have traditionally done in the past. So there's nothing specific I would like to highlight, but if there are any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Time for council comments, if any. If not, I'll declare this one closed at 5:58 PM. And is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Roll call.
Goudy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Very good. That one carried as well. And Madam Clerk, would you read the next item?
This would be for the public hearing and the third reading relating to the ordinance adopting the 2015 fire code as amended.
And for this one, I'll declare it open still at 5:58 PM. Did you receive any written comments to the clerk's office?
I received one comment against from Sally Wilson.
And I think that was distributed among the counselors today.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there public comments before any staff review?
My name's Sally Wilson. I'm a professor of biology out of the community college. I'm here as a as a member of the community, as a citizen, but just by way of familiarity and credentials. I wanted to just talk about open burning with everyone. It's a very serious health hazard, particularly to the elderly and children. Over 2,200 Iowans are hospitalized with asthma attacks every year, with the highest rates being with young children and the elderly. Since we have the Veterans Home here, which is one of the largest nursing home facilities in the nation, actually, and a number of elder care facilities, we really are putting, and a very high percentage of the residents at the Veterans Home are dealing with respiratory impairments and COPD and various other respiratory illnesses. They're at very high risk when they are exposed to things like open burning. So I've had a student that I've worked with at the community college who's done research on this and put together a brochure, which I shared with the council members, and that I'm starting to distribute in the community to educate people about what the impacts of open burning are. I remember having some nostalgia about smelling the leaves burning in the fall and realizing that this was, a certain time of the year. But I also want to point out to people a couple of things about the burning of leaves, vegetative matter. One of my students a couple years ago made a PowerPoint, and they had a slide that had a picture of a pile of leaves burning. And basically, it gives off the exact same toxins that lighting a cigarette does. And so if you imagine an enormous cigar or cigarette being lit in a neighborhood, that's the effect that we're having when we openly burn our leaves and other yard wastes. We have now nationwide banned a tremendous amount of smoking. Public smoking is no longer acceptable because we know of the effects of cancer and the other types of disabilities that occur or diseases that occur from exposure to particulate matter and the other toxins and pollutants that are in smoke. There are specific causative factors from particulate matter when we burn that lead to increased rates of stroke and heart disease and heart attack. And it's not just the breathing of the smoke immediately. There's secondhand smoke. There's third-hand smoke. It gets into the neighborhood. The other thing that's really different today than it was in the past is that a lot of our materials, even our yard materials, are no longer completely natural. So many people use chemicals on their lawns. We have exhaust from our cars. We have many more cars, more exhaust that coats our vegetative matter in our yards. And when we burn all those things, we release very toxic chemicals into the environment that are very caustic. Your respiratory system is one of the most delicate systems in the body. I also teach anatomy and physiology at the college, and we talk about this as well. So we have a really wonderful composting facility here, and I would really like to see a stronger effort made in our community to educate people about the impacts of open burning so more people would elect not to do so, and to work on improving anything that our citizens are finding difficult to do in terms of composting. Could we improve upon that in some way to make people less likely to open burn? I would love to see it banned, but of course I'm not suggesting that this is something that happens right here. But it is something to think about. How can we discourage it from going on when it has such devastating impacts on the community in general? I don't think it's something we really want other people coming to our community to have to experience or be exposed to. I did check on our neighboring states, and in Nebraska, outdoor burning is basically banned. Wisconsin, generally prohibited because of exposure or effects on health and environment. Minnesota, it's by permit only, and you have to buy your permits in order to do it. In Missouri, it's by permit. So there's different ways that we could regulate some of it a little bit more. I realize that, and I have worked with Chief Ryerson. He's been very receptive and very positive to work with, and he made a very good effort to try and get some feedback from the community. And in doing a survey, but I would also point out that that's not really a representative survey. If we do a really truly representative statistical survey, we would do a randomized survey over a large sample of the whole community. And when it's an elective survey, you don't always hear from everyone. Not everybody knows where it is, when it's being done, or how to access it. I just wanted to increase awareness, educate folks, and the last thing I want to point out is people didn't want to wear seat belts when we first started talking about safety. People didn't want to stop smoking in public or anywhere else, and for many years resisted the idea that cancer was a dangerous thing. And, nobody wore bike helmets when I was a kid. But all of those things have saved lives, and all of those things have made our world safer and healthier for everyone. So I would encourage everyone to please think about, read through the information. Please let me know at the college if there's more information that would be helpful, and in what ways my students and other members of the community and other citizens can help to expand knowledge about this so that we have fewer people being exposed to these irritants and having asthma attacks and ending up in the hospital. And potentially, I don't know if anybody is familiar with how dangerous asthma is, but it is potentially fatal, and I've lost several friends to asthma attacks. So it's a very dangerous thing. I also have informational brochures for anyone that's interested, and would love to have anybody else help with sharing education about the impacts of open burning.
The brochure is excellent. I had asthma as a kid and got a 4F because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
It's very scary. My brother had asthma too, and I remember as a kid being terrified when he would have an asthma attack and couldn't breathe.
Exactly.
So a lot of people end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
So
That was a very articulate presentation. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If there is no other public comment, let's go with staff review.
David Ryerson, Marshalltown Fire Department. Well, as instructed at last council meeting, I went in and I amended the portion on allowing people to go together and burn in a neighbor's yard, or collectively go together and burn. And you should have had a copy in your packet of the revised ordinance.
Thank you.
Chief, one question. I know we did a survey probably a year ago or more. The results of that survey, to remind us, were what? What were the results of that survey?
The results were that people wanted to leave to continue to open burn.
And the percentage there was what?
I'd have to get that.
60-some%.
I'd have to get the literature and look at it. I don't have it with me. But yes, it was overwhelmingly to continue open burning.
Other council comments? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed at 6:08 p.m. and invite a motion to approve.
I move for approval, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have one question, I guess.
Yes, sir.
So we're saying, with the way we're going to vote, that 10 neighbors could go together and throw all their twigs in a pile and have one fire. Is that what I'm hearing? Or that's what's being allowed?
That was the amendment that Councilmember Martin had proposed at the last meeting and was approved at the last meeting. So that is before you today.
Other council comments? Or public comment?
Linda Clark, 306 South 2nd Avenue. I have an issue with this because I would question if there's a group of like 10 that are doing this on one person's property, supposing it gets out of control, who is going to be liable and responsible for, saying, the fire department having to come? The way the law is now, a residential property is the only one that can do open burning. That residential property owner is responsible if there is a problem with the burning. I have an issue with the group doing that. Who's going to be responsible? That's the only comment I'd like to make. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? If not, let's take a vote.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
No.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Motion carried. Ordinance adopted.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, let's go on to the next item.
We have the third reading of the ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property on amendment number 7 to the urban renewal plan for area number 3.
Is there a motion to approve that ordinance?
So move, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mr. Isom. Any discussion up at the table up here?
This is just a reminder, as this is the third and final reading of the ordinance to add in the area to urban renewal, area number 3, which includes some of the sections, half sections behind Walmart and area between 12th Street to city limits along Iowa Avenue.
Thank you. Any further discussion up here or out in the public?
Is this the one that the county had a lot of problems with? That they sent us a 3 or 4 page letter about?
Yes, so you've already adopted that urban renewal plan, so the plan has been adopted, but you had to do an ordinance to incorporate the new area. So this is the final reading on that ordinance.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
Yes.
Gowdy.
Yes.
Thank you. That one carried as well. Now to the discussion items. Number 1 is the quiet zone study presentation.
I'll get this one kind of kicked off and kind of summarize what I put in my memo and turn it over to Greg pretty quickly. This was actually, it was back in 2010 when Bolton and Mink first did a quiet zone study for the city. And that, I think there was one action that started to move forward related to 6th Street and then ultimately did not get approved. And then there was really no discussion of a quiet zone until 2017 when we reached out to Bolton and Mink again to have them update the 2010 study, knowing that things kind of change. And so they did that, I think finalized it in early 2018. And waiting for that good time to bring it to the council, we had a tornado hit, which really made it not a good time until now. So what's also happened in the meantime was this was something that came up as a discussion point in many of the public meetings and steering committee meetings for the downtown master plan. And so this is actually one of the items on the checklist for the top priority projects was to follow through with this, as it was stated that basically some of the train noise could be an impediment to downtown living and development. Overall, outside of the downtown master plan, this is something that we really do look at as a quality of life issue. And so Greg is going to go through more of the actual projects, which we now have before us here, and talk a little bit more about quiet zones in general.
Yes, thanks, Jessica. Hi, Mayor, Council. Greg Broussard with Bolton and Mink. So kind of just what Jessica said, we're going to go through the quiet zone. What I want to do is spend just a couple of minutes, walk through to make sure we review what a quiet zone is and what we're trying to implement, and then talk about our projects. Let me jump to my presentation. Just some quick numbers to think through. So we've got 4 major at-grade crossings that are on public tracks, 41 trains per day, about 21 during the day, 20 at night. Each time they cross a crossing, they blow 4 times. So essentially 656 horn blasts a day. That's pretty conservative because that's not counting the movement in the yard. That's just trains that go straight through town. So I think we're probably close to double that by the time we start looking at all the trains in the yard as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is how do we reduce those number of horns. So what is a quiet zone? There's the Federal Rail definition. Long, easy way to say it, it's a reduced horn area. It's not an eliminated horn area. The engineers still have the ability to sound their horns in case of emergency, but essentially what we do is we create a a zone at each crossing that the FRA and that the different railroads are in agreement with, that they do not need to blow their horns. So right now, just to give you an idea, it's roughly a 15 to 20 second pattern, and then the ranges, it has to be a minimum of 96 and up to 110 decibels. So that is a very large area, and when you start looking at how that disseminates from those locations at those crossings, it covers a large portion of the town as well. Little bit of background on quiet zones. So prior to 2005, cities were kind of doing their own thing. They could come to some sort of an agreement with each individual railroad to implement what they were calling whistle bans. They started seeing increased train car accidents because of those whistle bans. So that's when there was a federal law enacted in 2005 that required trains to sound their horns, and it put any changes to that requirement on the local jurisdiction to mitigate those increased risks. So if you wanted to do a quiet zone or whistle ban, the local jurisdiction was the ones who were in charge of taking care of that. So that's where the quiet zones were introduced. So doing a quiet zone, now it's the city's cost, the city's money to implement those requirements and those features that make that safe for a train not to sound its horn. So some terminology real quick. SSM, supplemental safety measures, those are pre-approved options that we can just automatically install at each crossing that automatically meet the Federal Railroad requirements. If those are installed, we can implement a quiet zone. There are some other alternative measures, but we try to do the supplementary ones first to start with. The ones that are pre-approved, we could close a crossing. We could convert a roadway to one-way instead of two-way. We can look at putting 4-quadrant gates, so putting a gate on each side of the roadway, both directions. Or the picture that I have here, this is on 12th Ave. This is a approach gates with raised medians. That is usually the most cost-effective method. If you have the space to do that, that's going to be much more effective than like a quad gate. And then when you start looking at one-way conversion and road closures, those are kind of a little bit different option and an alternative as well. Essentially, what we do is we look at and we compare, if we put a quiet zone in, we get an index or a safety index with that quiet zone. We compare that safety index for our proposed quiet zone to the national. If our proposed quiet zone is less than the national, we're approved. Don't have to go through any additional requirements. If it's higher, then we have to start having conversations. If we use those SSMs, those supplemental safety measures, those automatically put us below the national threshold. So all of our proposed improvements are going to put us below the national threshold, so they make our approval process really easy. I'm not going to go through this. Jessica went through a lot of the background. I do also have Neil Guest with me from Bolton and Mink. He did the original report in 2010, so if we start talking through the original report, Neil can help answer questions from that. So this map shows how long our quiet zone would be. So the blue line represents how far our quiet zone would go. So it would end roughly on the east side of town, right about 18th Avenue. And then it would work itself all the way west of town for a total of 6.2 miles. Once again, it won't mean that every train horn is silenced. The engineers still have the option and to sound the horn if they feel like there's an imminent emergency. We could also look at potential horns on the crossings on the spur that goes to JBS and down to Menards as well. So those two spurs, those are private crossings, so we can't regulate those. So they would still sound their horns at those, but those are much less than all the horns, all the trains that come through town. So what I want to do now is talk through each one of the 4 areas. So 12th Ave, we already have medians installed. We just need to do minor improvements. If you've drove by that recently, you'll notice that some of the barricades or some of the delineators on top of the median are gone. Need to replace those. Need to touch up the pavement marking. Need to put in advanced warning signs. And then a couple of the medians need to be repaired actually as well. They've got some
cracks and some heaving in those that need to be replaced. No major impacts to adjacent businesses or adjacent landowners. Rough cost there, you can see from 57 to 61. So then we're going to jump to the other way west end of town onto 12th Street. What I handed out too was larger displays of what will be the next picture, just so you can see those. So on 12th Street, recommending installation of median islands, doing the pavement widening, advanced warning signs. We do have two potential impacts there. On the north side of that crossing, there is the AEA driveway, and there's a residential driveway. By the time we put, let me flip, so that way people in the audience can see this. So the blue is the pavement widening, orange are our new center medians, and then the purple are track extensions for crossings. So when you put the new medians in, it will make that residential driveway and the AEA driveway right in and right out only. They will still have access. We're not closing those driveways. The AEA will have to, that's what we're going to propose as we work through with the FRA. Since that's a commercial drive, they may request us to move it. We're not sure, but this is where we're going to start. So if, those costs were $230 or $320 to $384, depending upon just what we're seeing. A lot of those costs in there, probably over half of them are costs that go directly to the railroad for doing, they do all the work with inside the railroad right away. So they are going to be they would be the ones that extend like the panels in here. They do any gate or signal movements, and then just general requirements inside and the permits inside the right of way as well.
Would you go back one slide, please?
Yeah. This one on 12th
Yes,
Ave?
that one. Yeah. I thought I got my 12ths mixed up right
Oh,
away, so I had to.
it's the last one. And
yeah, I thought it was 12th Ave,
Yeah,
but I
that's
wasn't sure. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
One thing we did not do on 12th Street as compared to 12th Ave, if you drive 12th Ave, you'll notice that there is, on the bike path that crosses, there are chicanes for the pedestrian movements. There are no pedestrian sidewalks here, so there are no chicanes involved with this one going across just because there is no sidewalk.
What, I don't know what a chicane is.
A chicane is, so if you drive 12th Ave, it's how like a pedestrian would walk and they zigzag. That's chicane is the fancy word for zigzag.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Isn't there one right there, that little bike path that goes across?
You can see it in the picture.
In the lower left
on 12th
there.
Ave, yes.
No.
There's
yeah.
you can see the
Okay.
chicane in 12th Ave.
But on 12th Street, there's a little bike path right there.
Yes, on the south side, and since that's running parallel and not crossing the tracks, that's why that one's okay.
So you can see how the median actually has a split in it, so that bike traffic or pedestrian traffic can still cross 12th Street and not have to go over a median, but it's not something that a car could get through.
Gotcha.
So that's 12th Street. Next is 6th Street. A lot of the same recommended improvements. We're looking at adding those median islands, some pavement widening, some advanced warning signs. This one has a little bit bigger impacts. So directly on the north side of this crossing is SNT Trucking. They're in the picture in the background here with the gray building. They have loading docks right now that they access off of 6th. Jessica has been able to have conversations with S&T, and they would be interested in moving their loading docks to the north side of their building and not needing them on this side. So that takes part of the conversation I think that was previously had with this property and addresses those. The costs that you see for this do not address any of that because I'm not quite sure how that would be cost shared or how that would be done with that private property owner. But we have hopefully found a way around that one there. There also is a residential access. There's a gate, there's a fence with a gate in it that it looks like a resident accesses their backyard, which would still be allowed to be there. So here's the recommended improvements. So on this one, you'll see the blue is the pavement widening, and we're doing we're proposing quite a bit larger pavement widening at the corner of 6th and Player. And the reason we're doing that is for bus turning traffic, making sure that since that's a major bus route, we're able to get buses around that corner. They're not going to have any issues with the median. The green is a proposed trail on the west side of the tracks. And then you can see how that ties in on the north side with S&T's driveway. So once we get through that project, or once we start to move forward, we can have conversations with S&T of if we move their dock to the north side, could that driveway even potentially go away? That would be my goal, would be to see that go away. But I don't know. We have to talk through that with that property owner and figure out how to do that. Any questions on the 6th Street one?
I think that was the one that did cancel the going forward.
Yep. So being able to, having new property owners and being able to relocate that dock to the north side is a major benefit to the project.
And that conversation I had was more than a year ago. It was before the tornado.
Yeah.
We haven't had any more recent conversations, but at that point there was a willingness to figure out how you make it all work too, because it's a safety issue for them to backing trucks in and out of there as well.
On 2nd Street, we looked at 2 different options here, and this is where we looked at options and we would like some feedback to figure out what the council's looking at and what their preference would be. So option number 1, just like the other ones, installation of a median island, curb installation, pavement widening. We would recommend, because we are crossing 4 tracks here, and they are wide distances apart. So with the safety aspects, removing the sidewalks is going to be a recommendation from the FRA as well. And we start looking at removing sidewalks there, and that makes me a little nervous, because with the Y being right there, you're still going to get people crossing, even if you remove those sidewalks. So now where are they going to be crossing? So now we start looking at, okay, what are other options and alternatives? And another option would be a full closure on 2nd Street of, it would actually be closing 2nd Street and giving that crossing back to the railroad. One other minor impact is, so in this picture, Manats has a driveway that is actually in between the rail and the gate. So it's, we don't know if it's an illegal driveway or not. We don't know if they have a permit with the UP, but we would look to close that because that's a very unsafe driveway. So that's something we can investigate too as part of this process. So the next 2 slides, this one is the first option. So adding the little bit of pavement widening, some curb, removing the sidewalks, which is the red, and then adding our medians. And then we have our second option, which is a full closure of 2nd Street. So I know this is probably going to be where the biggest discussion needs to be had on what council's thinking and kind of your idea on it. So I guess I'm looking for maybe thoughts or questions on this one.
Any comments about that? I've rarely seen anybody walking there.
It actually, there was, I think a few years ago, and Chief Tupper might be able to comment a little bit more, there was the Union Pacific Railroad Police had done something in that area, and I think there were like 23 citations issued for trespassing in a 2-hour period. I reached out to UP to verify those figures, but it was an immense amount of people that were trespassing into the right-of-way during a very short amount of time.
Did anybody think about a pedestrian bridge?
So as you talk about a bridge, that's a
I'm
completely
serious.
separate thing from what we're talking about right now.
I understand. We
So
could close but we could close this and put the bridge in.
You certainly could. And so that's where I want to keep those as separate projects, because you're talking about 2 very different cost impacts, where there still is a impact here of whether you close this or make the improvements to make it a quiet zone that you can't do. If you do nothing with this crossing as it is, we don't have a quiet zone because it's right in the middle of town. And so that's where really the how you get over the tracks, I think, is the other, question to be resolved at a future point.
Well, my point is, if we put a pedestrian bridge across, we can close the street. And then you don't have the issue with it. It's a quiet zone automatically because there's no street there.
You'd be basically doing the same thing as turn it back over. I think what we're saying, the quicker process is not to construct a bridge or design a bridge or do that as a first step, but to consider that on the back end with some cost estimates. I believe that it's been looked at previously, and it was cost prohibitive in previous looks at it. So, but it's certainly something that we could come back to you with as an estimate of what a pedestrian bridge would look like and could cost.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the access, our office is on 2nd Street, so we can go straight south to the Y, but if there's a train there, the detour isn't very far. You just go over to 3rd Street,
Yep.
go past the Quick Star and come back around by the Aquatic Center and you're
Yeah, and
Sure.
that's one of the reasons why when we were looking at that, we even started looking at, because we look at detours and the time of detour is very minimal for the 2nd Street closure. Yes, it does affect residents. It does affect business owners. We understand that, but now it's kind of the weight of the safety of and getting a quiet zone versus closing this, or how do we deal with if we leave it open and we remove the sidewalks, how do we deal with that? Obviously, we're going to recommend signing that say do not cross, sidewalk ends, and detour routing, but that's still not going to stop those pedestrians from potentially crossing those removed sidewalks.
If we get the 6th Street pathway that connects the two paths, that will help ameliorate that and let people get to where they want to go another way, though.
So
too.
one other thing that Neil said that they've had success with is once you close that, actually fencing off the UP right away, so there wouldn't be the space for a pedestrian to cross if you were to close that full intersection as well.
Right.
I've had good experience in the past with the UP cooperating with that.
Good.
Being supportive of it so they
Okay.
can protect their property too.
They actually did some of it already, the UP. That black fence on the west side, they put that all up right after we did that. So you're right.
And it's 4 feet tall, very easy to jump over.
So.
Not for me.
Me.
Yeah, but you're driving. So the fencing is not included in the price for the full closure, right?
A lot of times you can get the UP to put the fence in and at their cost.
We'd start there.
Okay.
The other thing to point out, if you would consider closing 2nd Street under the FRA rules, the Iowa DOT and the railroad both have to kick money in towards the crossing, a payment to the city. And there's a minimum set by code, but sometimes if it's an important one to the UP to close, they'll kick in some extra money. But we just have to wait for that. It's not going to pay for the cost, but it helps.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I would be on record as saying to make it passable and not shut it off. I think there's more traffic and more foot traffic there than you think.
I think you're right.
Okay.
I would tend to agree, especially with the delta in cost between the two different options, the cheaper of the two being I don't want to say cheaper, but the less expensive of the two being the passable crossing still. So I guess.
No, it's not. No.
The
It's
option
confusing because option 1 is actually option B in the packet, and option 2 is option A in the packet.
The full closure is the cheaper option, and and doing all the keeping it open is the more expensive option.
Thank you.
And I think it would be much safer to close it. Kids will find the detour. People will find the detour. It's not very far away. It's worth it. It really is not as safe. I always cringe when I see people walking and riding over it on bicycles. So
You can lose your dentures riding over it on a bicycle, I can tell you.
Now, I would point out that these schematic plans could change some, that we still would have to meet with the railroad and the Federal Rail Administration and seek their input on the closure. That still has to be done.
I personally am just happy the dialogue is going again, and we don't have the same problem on 6th Street that we did the last time the council voted on this about 6 years ago.
Yep.
And the price tag, I mean, tonight, by consent agenda, we approved a $1.8 million budget, payment of expenses. And so in the big scheme of things, if you look at our viaducts and the other things that we've done around town here, this isn't that big a cost or big a deal, and it would be really nice for the hotel, motel people.
Yep, and then even, so I grew up in Marshalltown. Even just hearing all the train horns in town would be nice to hear them quieted.
And thank you for bringing up funding, Mayor, because this is something where in this year's capital improvement plan, we hadn't had these discussions earlier. I was working off an estimate. I threw in the full total of $1 million price tag into the road use tax fund for this year. We cannot use all of that money towards this because, as Greg mentioned, a lot of work that would need to be done on all of these intersections is going to be a payment to the Union Pacific for work that they're doing in their right-of-way. And so there is, I think, approximately about $300,000 to $400,000 of street work that would be eligible. And so if this is something you do want to move forward with, we would be wanting to include the remainder to be borrowed as part of our fiscal year or calendar year 2020 borrowing, which would be coming up this fall still. So that's where we do have probably, you don't have to make any decisions tonight. No. We just wanted to get this out in front of you tonight, and I'll turn it over to Greg to talk about next steps.
Yeah, so essentially what we wanted to do was, if the council decides to move forward, I want to make sure you understand of the process and what we do. So what we did is we put together just a quick outline. So the next step would be to hold a public meeting and listen to what the public says, come back to council, share that information, and get further direction. If the direction then is to continue to proceed forward, we would prepare quiet zone applications, get those submitted, work with the UP, the FRA, hopefully the DOT. We had trouble getting them to show up, but actually do an on-site investigation, walk these each crossing and investigate it. We would then prepare design plans for the closures and safety improvements. And then you can kind of walk through the list. There's different notices that we have to do, different review times for the different entities. Then get all the improvements installed once we get final approval, and then issue the notice of establishment for the quiet zone. So the big thing, the question we're looking for tonight is, would council be interested in having a public hearing to, or public meeting, not hearing, public meeting to listen to the residents and see what their thoughts are on this?
Yes.
I think that's an easy answer. I think that's yes, no doubt. I just had one question. So this creates a quiet zone, but there's nothing that holds the trains coming through to adhere to that quiet zone. I mean, if they blare their horn continuously as a practice, there's any way to enforce that?
So when a quiet zone is in place, the only time that a engineer does it is if they see a imminent safety, how is that worded, Neil? Mm-hmm. Imminent safety danger. Otherwise, they don't do it. So if you walk through, we just did one in Ogden. Ogden, I don't think they've heard one in months. Because of that, and it's all up to that engineer's discretion, but setting this up gives that engineer the ability to make that call ahead of time because he knows those proper safety measures are in place.
I'm familiar with one in Duff and Ames, and the sound, if you're right at the tracks, you can hear the noise coming from the devices at the tracks.
Ames has what are called wayside horns, so they're directly directed at the cars there, so that way the train doesn't blow it.
So like 3 blocks away, you're probably not hearing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have had cases in the past where we've had an engineer that did not want to cooperate. Citizens were complaining. We asked them to log the time of the train, what direction was heading, and we got to their supervisors. And then they started following the new rules.
One thing, just to make clear, it was kind of brought up, is that we do have a very big rail yard that's here as well. And so that is where train noise would still happen. As they're backing up trains, hooking up new cars and things, unloading, there would still be the sounds there, purely safety purposes at that point. So it's not as though you would never hear a train sound again in Marshalltown, but it would be pretty restricted to the yard, or unless there was a safety issue.
That would be something to consider with the Second Street crossing on whether you close it or leave it open. because that's right on the edge of that switching area.
Other comments or questions up here?
So that schedule you give us, that's 2 years? I know how the railroad works on their reviews. They could take 2 years just to review it, knowing those guys.
The toughest thing we have is getting all the parties together for
Right.
the diagnostic review. If things went well at a public meeting, then bring that information back to council. We could possibly have that meeting this fall, do the design work over the winter, do the construction work next year, and then publish all the proper notices.
You think you can get the railroad to approve it that quick?
Once we make that submittal to them, they have a certain number of days they have to
Oh,
comment.
okay.
If they don't comment back within that period, we assume they have no objection.
All right,
It's laid out just very specific.
okay, thanks.
So I was going to say, we'll work with Bolton and Mink to schedule a public meeting to get some input and maybe look at some online surveys and
Yep.
stuff as well to get people outside of a public meeting.
Does anybody up here object to that? Oh, go for it then.
Okay.
Great.
We will, we'll hold that and then we'll get back to you and let you know what they say.
Thank you. Okay, discussion item number 2, 12th Avenue Shared Use Path Project Update.
Again, Justin Nickel, Public Works Director and City Engineer. Earlier this month, engineering staff, along with staff from Clapsaddle and Garver, held a public meeting for the 12th Avenue Shared Use Path Project. To refresh your memories, the council tasks engineering staff with going and starting the design of an 8-foot wide shared use path with the northern terminus at Anson and 12th Avenue, and then extending south past Olive to the southern driveway of Emerson Fisher and Governor Road. And then we are installing or planning the design for the installation of a 5-foot sidewalk from 12th Avenue and Olive to 17th Avenue and Olive, and then extending a 5-foot sidewalk north on 17th Avenue to the halfway house. The public meeting that we held on July 1st was really to introduce the project to the public and then to get the discussion rolling on the need for right-of-way of this project. Just about every project or every property along 12th Avenue would need at the minimum a temporary construction easement, and there are a good number that would need a permanent easement for the installation of the bike hike trail. We had pretty good attendance at that meeting, and we did hear some feedback from the residents and business owners and property owners. They had concerns about the safety of the path. They had concerns about the liability of the path. They had concerns about the maintenance of the path. We have discussed with Parks and Rec, if it's an 8-foot path, we would, the city would be responsible for the plowing of snow along that 8-foot path. If it was not an 8-foot path, the city would not be responsible for the plowing of snow. As far as the maintenance, after that meeting, I discussed with Jessica, and we went back to the city attorneys with Lynch Dallas, discussed that if it is an 8-foot path within the right-of-way, that we would not necessarily waive, but we would step away from the usual city code that says that all property owners are responsible for the adjacent sidewalk and the adjacent curb next to their property. And so the city would be responsible for the concrete or asphalt maintenance of this path. Those are kind of the highlights of where we are today. I would remind the council that in our 2018 borrowing, we did borrow $900,000. Is that correct, Jessica?
I think so, yeah.
So we borrowed a good chunk of money for the design and construction of this path. And would remind the council that we do have an executed agreement with Clapsaddle and Garber for the design of this path. So we've expended some funds, and we're down the road a little bit here. But we did want to make sure that the citizens, the property owners, business owners had a chance to come in and share the concerns they had with us with the city council. We didn't have anybody present that night, but as I said, the intent really was to get the ball rolling on right-of-way acquisition. So whether it was my mistake or not, we didn't invite anyone from the city council that evening. So I'd be happy to step aside and let our property owners get up here and can voice some of their concerns to you. We would be looking for some action after this, either to continue and when after they've spoken, I'll probably come back up and finalize.
Very good. Time to invite public comment.
Hi, good evening. We are Scott and Carrie Kilstrom. We own Electric Supply of Marshalltown, located at 1008 South 12th Avenue. We stand opposed to the bike path being put on 12th Avenue on the east side of our road, mostly because of safety concerns. I'll go over some of those points. Semi-traffic entering and backing up into multiple driveways multiple times during the day is our main concern. We receive numerous tractor-trailer deliveries to our one loading dock located on 12th Avenue. The drivers turn and enter, reposition, and then turn and back into the loading dock. This can stop the traffic on the road and take several minutes depending on the truck size and driver skills. This concerns me deeply, as I've stated before. My biggest nightmare is a child on a bike cruising down this path at 17 miles an hour, making contact with one of these semis. This is probably my biggest concern. My question to the council would be, has there been an Iowa DOT survey in the area to conduct how many large vehicles are entering and leaving these numerous driveways along this path? It is an industrial area on the east side. We provide service to customers, but we receive so much merchandise through that loading dock. We are not alone in this. I want the council to consider all of the various drives and their traffic patterns. Construct is present on that side of the street. They have large dump trucks that come in and out of their drives multiple times a day. UPS trucks are in and out of their lot, creating quite a traffic flow into their two entrances. The intersection of Industrial Boulevard hosts multiple semi-trucks that service Augustine, Mediacom, Fastenal, H&F Distributing, and others just down that road. Casey's has double driveways and hundreds of vehicles and truck deliveries are in and out of there each day. I'm not as familiar with the traffic patterns along the rest of the proposed route, but I know we're not alone in our concerns. In addition to heavy delivery traffic, we thankfully have customer traffic in our service area. Our customers mainly use the 12th Avenue Drive, and it could be as many as 50 or 60 vehicles a day in and out of that lot. My concern is also the benefit of the service to the residents. On the west side of the street, we have an residence that is considered to be for elderly people. There are many of them that have walkers and wheelchairs. If the path were built on the west side of the street, I see them accessing that and being able to go further with their walks and connect to South Street or other places. I feel as though the people of our community should be using this bike path safely and not crossing that traffic to get to it, especially when they're elderly people. Putting a path on the east side of 12th Avenue currently leads to nowhere. It connects to nothing, and is, if and when the land is ever developed to connect this path with adjacent paths, could be decades. I've seen the proposed other paths that could connect it to the other areas in which we have bike paths, and I understand that because I am a bike rider, but I'm also a mom, and I know how my kids rode bikes when they were that age. You don't put a leash on them. You know, they're just wild out there sometimes. But I do believe that there is a recreation area and restaurants, parks, or schools on the east side of 12th Avenue. But on the west side, we have a school not far right down South Street, and it does not have a sidewalk, mind you, from 7th Avenue to 12th Avenue at all on either side of the street. But that's just my observation. Such a path on our side of East 12th Avenue puts the patrons of the path in an unnecessary danger of the large vehicle contact and the owners of the property with the burden to maintain a path and carry that liability. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks for your input. Other public comment?
One thing, they did ask about a DOT study, and just to remind you, this was the top priority in the gap study that we were all talking about a year ago. And the reason was as we identified the areas of town that had sidewalk gaps, this was the only area that had a documented history of pedestrian motorist accidents. No other area around town that we were looking at. I think South Street is in our plan for next year, I believe, or the year after that. This was the only one that actually had any history of pedestrian vehicle accidents.
But that was because they were walking on the road, right?
Correct. There's currently no sidewalk there, and so the only option is to walk in the roadway.
Was it 2 in 10 years?
I don't remember the exact, but yeah, we've had
Two in,
more
I
than
think-
one pedestrian accident.
So are we allowed to have a discussion, or
Sure.
we're just gonna listen to them, or can we react back a little bit?
And I was going to say, and to clarify, I was just able to pull it up that year 2 of our project, which we've already kind of talked about that we want to proceed with year 2, does have us putting sidewalk on South Street from 7th Avenue to 12th Avenue on the north side of the street because there is not currently any sidewalk there. So that connection is part of our year 2 plan.
Our council and our city staff had to be asleep at the switch years ago when we allowed developments to go in without sidewalks. Like Southridge Road is another example. Why in the heck did we not put sidewalks in when they built the houses out there? But it's open discussion, Coach.
I was just saying, I know these folks and I respect them, but my question would be back to you. All these trucks that you're talking about that come and go and turn and twist, still will do that. But the unfortunate part now is you have people in the street walking and riding. And that would be my argument there, that I would rather have them on a walkway than in the street.
And I would agree with that, Al, 100%. I don't oppose a path being built on 12th Ave. I oppose it being on the industrial side, on the east side. And I know we looked at the cost, and we were told that the cost was actually cheaper to be on the east side. I'm not sure how that could be when you are talking about numerous driveways that all have to be redone and entries that aren't there now, where on the other side of the street you have a lot more real estate that is residential. There's no trucks and large vehicle contact.
On the residential side, there are garages that are built in the, whatever you want to call it, a right-of-way that maybe shouldn't be there where they're at. So you'd have to deal with that. So the east side was like a straight shot.
Had they ever considered just doing the 5-foot sidewalk instead?
That's
Yeah.
what I thought we were going to do all along.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly believe there needs to be a safe place to be.
Right. I think the original plan
Yes.
that we designed was on the west side, a regular sidewalk. But it took a lot of, I think there's electrical in there, and I think lots of trees and maybe some buildings, you're saying. I don't remember that part, but it was just going to be a lot to move. So I think we looked at the other side as being easier to accomplish. Yeah, anyway, that's what I'm remembering pictures of back then.
And I think when we talked about it the first time, we weren't going clear to the south driveway of Fisher Control either.
I thought we went to Olive.
We just went to Olive and turned and went east.
I think so.
That was not what was originally presented in what we approved as being year 1. It did go all the way down to the Fisher property.
No, I mean, when, a
Like
few
10
years
years
ago,
ago.
when we were talking about this, that is not the plan that was brought forward.
I'd like to speak here. I wish that.
Yeah, just come on up to the mic so people on. I'm always surprised how many people watch this on TV.
Yeah.
You know, if I had insomnia, I would.
Okay, my name's Scott Killstrom. I was just wondering, what was the cost of CGA to do this survey? Is that included in the $100 million or $1 million project?
Yes, that's total project.
So 151,000 was it to do that?
I think that's pretty close, right, Heather?
I believe that was for everything, design, property acquisition.
So that's included in the 1 million. Okay. Well, I kind of wish that this project would have been brought to us before it got started. So like, contact us and tell us, you know, what was gonna happen so we can put our input in instead of having the project started before we can speak our mind. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, but of course, the survey was already done. I mean, the project was basically a done deal before we had you know, an input on our end. So, I guess, do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
And I think even, you know, on Olive Street from Grandview Nursing Home with those new apartments and those no sidewalks to there, to 12th Avenue. I think the $1 million could be spent somewhere else, myself, for some other project that's more important than that. So with that, I'll leave it as it is. So thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Gary Thompson, 601 East Main. I've got a really stupid question I hope you can answer. Did the halfway house create this issue? Is that a yes? Okay, can we take the 750?
There's a consideration.
Not really. I mean,
Okay, the two people that were hit, were they from the halfway house? Yes?
I don't know.
Yes.
No idea.
Yeah. The walking on that street is the halfway house, going to Lennox to work or going down to Swift's. Okay, let's take the $750,000 that's left in this project and let's build a new halfway house somewhere where there's a sidewalk. Rather than spend the $750,000 that's left and put a bike trail in and a sidewalks. And the owner's gonna have to keep the sidewalks up. That means the county's gonna be keeping theirs up by the fairgrounds. So I'm sure you're gonna hear from the supervisors on that, and the fair board. But what I was gonna say is, I like the idea of a bike path, but there's a lot better locations for that side of town to if you're gonna put a bike path and connect it with something else. So if the halfway house created the problem, let's figure out a path from the halfway house to where they're working, or let's move the halfway house. There's a lot of open property. I wish Sue was here tonight, because I'm sure there's a lot of open property that would love a development of a $750,000 building. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other comment?
Hi, I'm Kelly Steffen.
Thanks, Steffen.
I didn't want to come up and speak because I'm so upset about this project. We relocated our business on that section of 12th Avenue due to the tornado. We didn't have the funds in our budget to relocate. And to have somebody come in and tell us, quote unquote, this is a done deal, it's a member of the city council's baby, and if we don't agree to it, eminent domain will be used against us. I don't look kindly on that. Whether it's affecting us at our business or whether it's affecting our pocketbook as taxpayers, this sidewalk is not in a residential area, and it does not benefit the taxpayers of this community, and it does not benefit the business owners on that street, and it's foolish. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I think Justin was gonna, he wanted to provide some concluding thoughts.
So with that, staff would be looking for some council direction on whether to proceed as we have been, to make changes to the design, to stop the design. What is the council's wish?
So, one point of clarification, was there anybody that wasn't opposed at that meeting?
There wasn't anyone that was
In favor.
vocally in favor. We did have a representative from the halfway house. that was not opposed.
Can we?
First of all,
Can we
first of all, I
clarify?
don't have,
Oh, go ahead.
I don't have a, I thought we were back to the original design, the 5 foot. It just went to Olive Street and then over, because a lot of that work had already been done prior to a long time ago. So I figured a lot of that engineering work was already done. I'm not in favor of using eminent domain against anybody. And if that's part of this project, it's a no from me from day one. If we can make it so that we can build a sidewalk, not a 8 foot, whatever.
I would say even if we were building a sidewalk and we have opposition, we would need the power of eminent domain.
Well, I think if we can't sit down and talk to those council, I'm going to tell you that I've was in the public service for many, 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 many years. And I've bought a lot of property. And I have never in 40-some years used eminent domain to buy property for a governmental body. And I'm not in favor of doing it now. I think if you can't sit down across the kitchen table and figure out what it's going to take and make it work, that we shouldn't be there.
You and I'll have to have a discussion. That's probably the next closest one of 16 years of buying. I've negotiated with a dead person. With a partner that was dead, you cannot sit down across the table and negotiate with those people. So
Anyway.
there are places where eminent domain is the correct procedure.
Anyway, I'm not in favor of it, and I won't vote for it. I would want it, if we're going to proceed, I'd like us to proceed just with a 5 foot sidewalk that goes down 12th Avenue, turns at Olive, goes east along the fairgrounds, over to 17th and back up to the halfway house. And that's it. That's all we're building, just enough to get those people off the street.
One point of clarification to make is that a 5 foot sidewalk is actually a worse situation for the property owners because that does meet the definition of a sidewalk under our code of ordinances, meaning they have the responsibility to clear away all snow and maintain it in proper
That's
order.
exactly why it didn't get built last time.
Mr. Hoop, I know you had started to
Go
talk
ahead.
at the same time.
My comment was, so what is the latest, up-to-date, what are we doing? 8 foot sidewalk?
Yes, so the design that we're under contract with Clapsaddle and Garber is for an 8 foot shared use path from Anson and 12th Avenue at the northern terminus, and then it's 8 foot wide all the way to the southern terminus at the south driveway of Emerson Fisher, south of Olive. And then it would be a 5 foot sidewalk along Olive Street on the north right of way from 12th and Olive to 17th and Olive Avenues. And then north, a 5 foot sidewalk from 17th Avenue, approximately a block and a half or so up to the halfway house, 2 blocks, a couple 100 feet.
So if it's 8 foot, that's at our cost, no cost to the property owner. We maintain it, we'll come clean it. And if it breaks or whatever, then the city would take care of it. So I guess I'm having trouble if there's no cost to anyone and you can get people off a street that has truck traffic, why wouldn't we want to do it?
I would not have let my daughters, ride their bikes out to the soccer complex. But this gets kids closer to the soccer complex if we come up with some solution. I don't have a vote, but I am interested in making sure we keep our kids safe. Other comments or questions up here? Does anybody want to move to give the city staff direction on where to proceed?
I'm not leaving till I get some direction.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, if this is something you want to think about, I mean, we do have a 3-week delay before our next meetings. I don't know if there's any major deadlines and things other than this is now probably pushed well into next year before anything could be constructed. And so, I mean, taking more time at this point, if that's what you need, is not going to make this happen any faster.
I stated 11 years ago that if we didn't do it, we would all feel really bad if someone got taken down on that street and killed by a vehicle. And I know of 4 people that were struck by a vehicle, but not real bad, but you know what I'm saying. They have been hit by a vehicle in some manner, and any one of them could have been hit worse. So why would you want to risk one more person being hit?
I'd interpret that as a motion to continue to move forward on it. Is there anybody that wants to second that?
I, for one, concur with Councilman Hoop. It's potentially and always has been dangerous, and access to this area by foot or by bike, I think is very desirable. You know, how to get from point A to point B, literally, is the question. But I think we need to somehow be creative on this and make folks satisfied with it. There's going to have to be some compromise, it looks like, all the way through. So, yeah.
I'll take that as a second.
So you want to
Open for more discussion.
What we're really asking for is, if you want to move forward, the thing to bring to the next council meeting would be a resolution authorizing the use of eminent domain in this project. Ultimately, as each property came up, if we were not able to reach a conclusion, that would still all come back to you on each individual property to move forward with at that point. But ultimately, at this point, as you can hear, if you don't want to use eminent domain, it is more than likely that this project won't be completed. And so that's what's really before you tonight. And so if you want to take 3 more weeks and put this back on a discussion item, we can certainly do that. Or if you want to take 3 weeks and we'll have a resolution on there so you can make a decision one way or the other about where this project goes, we can do that as well.
I guess to Al's point, I mean, was it presented as such that it's zero cost to the property owners? I mean, does it come down to the concern of safety only, or was that what was directly communicated, that this is nothing out of your pocket, this is all out of city's pocket?
Yeah, there is no cost to the property. There's no assessment that goes back to the property owners. They are paid for the use of their, if we buy a permanent easement, they would be paid for that. Much to Councilor Lammer's chagrin, eminent domain is the fairest way to get a price, and I won't go down that road. But you can't take somebody's property and build a bike path on it without them getting fair market value for their property. So I personally have no problem with eminent domain. It is the fairest way to get a negotiation solved between a property owner and a municipal government. There is no cost, to answer your original question.
I've never seen us go through eminent domain and somebody not get hurt, and somebody not be mad for the rest of their life, and that we don't need that in this town.
Okay.
We just don't need it.
So I think we're going to continue to have this discussion again and again. If sidewalks really are a priority, I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is going to happen over and over again over the next couple of years. If we truly want to get sidewalks built in this town, there are going to be people that oppose it because they're going to have to maintain snow. They're going to oppose it because we're going to have property. So to me, we're going to have to make a decision here in the next month or so. Is this really what a priority is for the city council? Because this is going to come up again and again and again.
So I got to agree with Justin on that one. So is there a motion in a second? And if so, I think we should proceed with it.
I think we've had a motion and a second.
Can I say something else before you do?
Is this for 8 foot?
The mic is still
you're
open.
in favor
Yes,
of
ma'am.
8 foot? And us
That's what's been proposed from what I
us maintaining it for the rest of our lives? Come on.
Unless there was something else that was decided after our meeting That is not what we were notified. We were notified that it would be maintained by the city until the city decided they didn't have the funds to maintain it. So it was left very unclear. I shouldn't say unclear. We understood that the city may maintain it, but probably not. Because it was made very clear that if the city decided they didn't have funds, they wouldn't be plowing it and they wouldn't be maintaining it. I also want to point out that if your concern is about people walking on that sidewalk, how are they going to get to the west side of the street? How?
The crosswalks are at Anson Street, and then as we mentioned, with next year's
I
priority
would
being
like
South
to
Street,
invite you
there
to
will be
our
another one on South
office
Street.
to watch that intersection.
Look up the statistics on that. Just since we've been there, we moved in September, there's been at least 3 or 4 accidents at that
They
corner.
don't stop at the stop sign. They clip the corner in front of our office. That is not a safe intersection. That was my other huge concern. If we're concerned about pedestrians, put the sidewalk on the residential side where the pedestrians should be, not on the commercial side. They have to cross that street to get to the other side. And don't say they'll put crosswalks. That doesn't matter. Do people stop for the crosswalks at Fisher's? No, they don't. And saying enforce it doesn't work either. It is not a safe plan. I'm very concerned about it. Not just because it offends me, not just because it affects me, because it's not safe. It's not the right decision. It really isn't. The only people that walk out there are the people from the halfway house. We see it every day. There's nobody else out there walking. They can walk down Olive Street. Put the sidewalks where the residents are, where the taxpayers are, where the citizens are that use them. Not in a commercial area where they have to cross the same street that you're concerned about the safety on. It's foolish.
Thanks for your input.
Hey, Joel, can I make one more?
If you come to the mic and introduce yourself, you can.
Quickly. Gary Thompson, 601 East Main. Quick question. I thought I heard that in this project, if you guys go with the 8-foot wide bike path, that you would waive that where the concrete approaches would be across it for driveways, you would waive that the owners would have to maintain it, the city would maintain that 8-foot strip?
If it's a shared use path, it does not meet the definition of a sidewalk, and it is city infrastructure, just as any other shared use path within the city would be.
When it crosses the driveway?
Correct. Sure. It's still part of the path when it crosses the driveway.
Okay, as a previous business owner, where my property, the UPS store, had an 8-foot asphalt path on the south side, you guys didn't pay for my concrete driveway that crossed that. So I guess I'll send you a bill for that. Thanks. So what I'm saying is I have a problem with that when the city's going to take over maintaining driveways for customers. I mean, now you're entering into a whole new thing.
It wouldn't be maintaining the whole driveway. It would literally be maintaining that 8-foot wide strip.
So
There
you're
would still be
saying-
snow removal responsibilities for the property
I
owner
understand,
outside of that.
but like we had to put that in. We paid to put that 8-foot concrete across there as part of our driveway. And now you're telling me that was your responsibility.
Not exactly.
No.
That's not the understanding.
No, I think what Justin had said as part of the scope of the project was in order to fit the trail in, you have to reconfigure the driveway entrances, and Heather's shaking her head to that.
Right.
So that reconfiguring based on our project would be at our cost.
For their driveway? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Your Honor, so I would be, Do you have access to that old plan where it was on a regular sidewalk on the west side?
I can look back.
Find
The
out.
original plan that I got, well, I believe was the year before I got here and was for an 8-foot path on the east side. Maybe not the original, but the iteration that I started with when I took employment here was for an 8-foot path on the east side. Bruce Campbell had worked on the design for that.
Nope. No, I don't know where it came from. That's not the one I let charge to kill.
You didn't have it. We can just put it back if you'll just say it's
I just, where did the idea of going clear south in front of Fisher's? I hate to say it, but I've been out at that Fisher plant several times, and there's nobody walking on an 8-foot sidewalk clear down there. Why are we building that half? I'd rather take that money and move it over and take it out to the soccer fields if we're going to do anything with it, and do a normal standard sidewalk, a 5-foot sidewalk, and do it where it might have some advantages and it might get used. I don't think I've never seen anybody walking out of the front of the Fisher plant and walking up through that grass. Have you? Yeah. They don't do that. That's a waste of money. That's a waste of no.
I think ultimately we would be looking for the connectivity. If we end up building East Merle Hibbs Road and there's a path that crosses there, or that follows the alignment of that over to Governor Road, then you'd be missing a portion from the Fisher Emerson plant. It's a different opinion, and I
That's
completely
many
acknowledge
years
yours.
down the road.
I understand, but
So let's build what we need today, not what we need in the future.
yeah, I would say that's a little short-sighted.
The problem we have today is some people at the halfway house that are walking in the streets, and we're trying to get them out of the streets.
Along with other pedestrians.
Well, yes, but that was our key, right? Isn't that what we're?
And I think we want kids to be able to get to the soccer complex by bike someday. But I'm getting a sense that nobody's going to move in second and take a vote to do anything tonight. So let's kick this down the road at least 3 weeks.
All right.
We can maybe have a resolution on the next agenda, and we'll get voted up or down. We'll see. I'm getting hungry.
We did have a motion from Hoop and Martin.
It wasn't really a formal motion.
Yeah, it really wasn't a
Okay.
formal. Yeah, I called it a motion, but it really
Okay.
wasn't. So let's discuss the incentives for development of a downtown urban renewal area 4.
Okay, so I just kind of wanted to brief you. This is something Council Member Lamer discussed of what is it that we have available for new developments in downtown. And so I thought this map would be helpful. One of the first things I'm going to mention but not really talk about in depth is our tax abatement program, which generally follows the pink outline that you have here as well, which is for any commercial development. Doesn't have to come before you at any point in time except for after it's built, where the owner can apply for a 100% 3-year tax abatement. And ultimately, it's typically the applications are due by February 1st. They come to you at a meeting in February for residential, industrial, and commercial. You approve those applications, and then they go to the county assessor's office where they are implemented. So our lifting and our load on a tax abatement is very different from the other thing that I'll talk about, which is the TIF or an urban renewal area. And so it's still the pink outline that we're talking about here. And I included in your packet the 2017 update to the urban renewal plan. And I'm not going to go through most of it because there's quite a few things in here that were actually public improvement projects, which really do not involve sort of any conversation of what we're talking about today. The one section I want to specifically take you to is what we just called the Central Business District Development Program, just generally to provide some what we considered priorities for potential development agreements, which priorities included construction of public infrastructure improvements infrastructure improvements that facilitate the development of upper floor residential uses, and to work with potentially private developers and property owners in projects that enhance economic development and remediate blight in the central business district. We then listed a few specific things as well, with the parameters that there would be no single agreement that you could approve that would be greater than $1 million that over a period of time that did not have to be amended into this plan. So if the mayor's law firm comes tomorrow, this is a bad example because conflict of interest, but if the mayor's law firm comes tomorrow and says, I'm going to build a giant building on State Street, and we do the calculation for what a rebate of incremental taxes looks like, and it's 1.5 million, we would have to amend this plan if you wanted to approve that to specifically state what we would be doing. So anything under that $1 million in total lifespan can come before you for consideration. You still have to have a public hearing. That is still a for sure thing. And so just know that that's kind of out there as our authority. I did have a conversation with Bob Jostin, who is our urban renewal and urban revitalization attorney, as well as bond counsel, about if, even though we didn't list something in here as a priority, is it something that you could still, choose to consider a development agreement for if it fell in the areas of economic development and blight remediation, as well as housing. He went back and looked at sort of the original plan, which we didn't get rid of the original plan when we've had 2 amendments to it. So the original plan talks about commercial and industrial development as well as housing being the priorities for the downtown area. So there's a lot of authority that is granted under here for you to consider some different things. And we actually do have 2 items that I did want to bring up for you just to jog your memory about. Back in, I think it was in December when we did this, if I look at the date, December 26th, we were having a lot of conversation related to our low-income housing tax credit projects, including with Landover Corporation, who is basically they're the ones who will be purchasing 12, 20, and 26 East State Street from us once the demolition has occurred. That they asked for a rebate of 90% of their incremental taxes for a 10-year period, not to exceed $350,000. So as we talk about what's out there, we've already started to have this conversation before having it more formally here at this table. So this is out there right now. I can tell you that they have come back with a request of a 100% rebate of their incremental taxes for a 10-year period, as they've learned that the cost of development in Marshalltown are a little bit higher than in their other areas. And so we'll be working with them on that. I did run the numbers. I think I had it pulled up. I don't have it pulled up. I ran the numbers, and it would basically take it from 90% to 100% would take it as a not to exceed $400,000 in a 10-year period. So let's talk a little bit about what not to exceed means in this sort of situation in a rebate of incremental taxes. What this actually looks like, and I think I apologize, I didn't print things out, but I think I saved it to I saved it to the desktop here. So I wanted to kind of show you how we do the math and how we come up with an estimate of what things might look like. And so ultimately, we have to look at how is the property being taxed? What's its tax class? So we've looked at multifamily residential here, which is a different sort of process. We've looked at an estimated assessed value, which they've provided to us, so it's their figure. Section 42 properties actually are assessed on a cash flow method and not based on construction costs. So they're not meant to be making an overwhelming profit or anything, so they get a reduced valuation in order to be able to stay at a very, very thin profit margin to provide that affordable housing. We have a frozen base value, which is, even though our lots are governmental owned, we don't pay taxes on them, they still had a frozen base value from when the district was established in 1998. And so then we kind of go through when would we expect evaluation, which I did update that here, and then what our likely total tax rate is and a TIF tax rate. So you'll notice that the total tax rate is higher than the TIF tax rate. That's because the school district, the city, the county, we all collect our debt service off of this. And there's a few other tax levies which are excluded from being part of the TIF incremental tax rebate. So as I looked, just this morning, I did these calculations so I could give you an example of what we're looking at. Assumptions built in, there's no valuation growth in any of this, which we know is probably not likely to happen, but that just gives you sort of a basis for where we stand. So this column right here was really what we were looking at with the 90% rebate. For that resolution, we rounded up because of the assumption of no growth, which we think is not likely to happen, but is easier to mess with than trying to, ballpark some growth on each year, especially when they're on this cash flow method. And so when I changed that to a 100% rebate, that's where we would again round up to a not to exceed $400,000. As you can see, it's based on what they would be paying in incremental taxes. So it's not as though the city just writes anybody a check for anything. They have to pay those taxes first. The county then gives those taxes back to us, which we then rebate back to the property owner. So it doesn't get anybody out of paying property taxes. In a TIF rebate agreement, they still have to do that step. We just give it back to them for a set period of time. So this is going to be one of our biggest tools that I think we have in our toolbox for long-term development. This is controversial. We've talked about it many times before. The thing that I would encourage you to recognize in this is that we don't have $1.87 million in value on those lots currently. There's a much lower value there. And so it's really not giving up current revenues. It's giving up future revenues for a set period of time, but those future revenues do include what would go to the school district and what would go to the county, as well as what would come to us as well. So we're all in it together type of thing, and basically deferring those property tax revenues to a future date. So that's the kind of the quickest and easiest summary I can give of one of the big tools that we have available to us, as long as we're considering dollar amounts less than $1 million over whatever period of time. So are there any kind of cursory questions I can try and answer on this one?
Maybe this is a dumb question, but this example specifically, their make it or break it's less than $50,000 for the project.
Yes, I mean, they're looking at other loans as well. Their project also specifically does include probably some environmental issues, which they're still discovering, where it's changing the cost. They had, and this is something that I think had they asked, we probably would have been able to tell them this, but they have other projects that they got awarded in Marion and in Dubuque, and they made the assumption that the development costs would be the same because there are contractor pools in Cedar Rapids and Dubuque. We don't have those same contractor pools here. So as they started to figure out, what is it going to take to get somebody here to actually build that, their costs went up compared to what their project would be in Dubuque or in Marion. And so I think we've kind of known that for a little while. CGA has run some numbers before on how much it does cost in Marshalltown to develop, and we're a little bit more expensive. And unfortunately, it is that we just don't have a pool of contractors here that's able to take on a lot of the work to be done. So it is one of the costs of development that I think we all have to be honest with ourselves about, that if somebody's looking at places and making choices, that's something that might stand out as an impediment to development in Marshalltown.
Any other questions or comments?
The other thing, I will encourage you to just look through the urban renewal plan. It's certainly something there. One of the things that we will need to be discussing here in the near future is this item where we provide funding to the Central Business District for the facade grant restoration. Jenny didn't really hit on it in total, but based on those applications that were approved tonight, there's $20,000, give or take, that remains in sort of the facade grant area to designate out. We know that there are going to be more needs than that, and so we do have some TIF cash on hand from this downtown district that Diana and I will be finalizing here for where it ended at the end of the fiscal year and what were those obligations that we had put in our budget, which you need to review and confirm that you still want those as obligations, like to use it for demolition of 4 and 6 West Grant Street and a few other things. So we'll be coming back to you and talking about this because I think that the facade grant is certainly one of those things that has been a significant tool and can continue to be in helping restore existing properties.
Input?
My turn. I asked to have this item put on the agenda, but it wasn't really a review of tax increment financing because it was a review that I felt that the way the applications are written, and I understand it's the intent of the application to help out existing buildings that are getting remodeled and upgraded to help them with their fascias, and if they had major costs such as running new sprinkler lines in where there's never been sprinkler lines and those kind of things, that we could assist with those. And I was approached by not just one person, by two, to talk about this issue because there's at least 2 and maybe 3 other businesses that are looking at new buildings downtown. And they felt like they should be able to fill out the same application and submit it to the city, since they're not asking for TIF money to pay for it. They're asking us to fund a facial grant for a new building. Since the way the program now is worded and run, it's only if you're rehabbing an old building. A new building gets nothing. And if somebody's willing to spend some money to build a brand new building downtown, I think we can help them out just like we can somebody that's restoring an old building. I wonder about, we helped out the lady on Main Street with her outside garden, which is pretty nice and a lot of people are using, but that was a total new operation. That wasn't a rehab of an old building because that building burnt down and it was a vacant lot that she worked from. So I think we've already kind of set a precedent that we will help new buildings, but I wanted to know what you guys thought about the idea. Should we be helping the new ones as same as we're doing the rehab? Or Jessica and we've had several conversations about this, and I've went back and forth on the item, and if somebody's willing to spend upwards of $1 million to build a new building downtown of all places, I think we ought to try to put some money into it. And I know they can get grants and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's our obligation. It's our downtown, and if they're willing to invest that kind of money, I think we ought to help a little. That's my personal feeling. I'd like to hear whatever other people think about that. If that's the wrong approach, since if they're building a new building, they got to do it anyway. But still, it seems to me like we could help them a little some way.
So one program to just make sure you're all aware of, it's been out there for a while that the state did grant us $1 million in Catalyst building grants. And so we haven't had, I think we only have one application that's really submitted a full application, and that is the Landover project at this point, which the committee decided we want to see more, knowing what we have in the pre-application pipeline before making some recommendations to the council about that money. So there is $1 million that is not our money out there. Specifically, what Councilmember Lamer and I had talked about is, like I said, there's this TIF cash that we have on hand where it's already there. You have the ability to utilize development agreements to provide funding to properties as well that are new construction. But more specifically, what he and I talked about was that you do have council designated local option sales tax. And we do have some applications that are out there right now. And if there was a desire to make an allocation of a certain amount of money, as we have a review committee that's reviewing these projects and trying to figure out, what is that funding level to strike, that another funding source not only shows the state that we're serious about their money too, but it also then, helps us sort of have a little bit more in to make the catalyst dollars go a little bit farther. So those are certainly options. I would like to think that when we get to the point of actually bringing you some recommendations for funding with the Catalyst grants, it's going to be the kitchen sink on things. That if it is something that qualifies for the facade restoration and code compliance program, that we're going to be trying to, ask you to allocate some dollars to that from sort of that specific program, as well as Catalyst dollars, as well as probably looking at a rebate agreement over a certain amount of time as well. So we really want to piece together as many pieces as, piece together, a real sort of picture here of how we get something done, knowing that these are developments that we really do need to happen in our downtown.
Jessica, could you pull up the map again for the tax abatement area?
I don't have the tax abatement map, so
Okay.
it's just generally sort of the same area. There's a few other boundary adjustments that makes the tax abatement one just a little bit larger.
So the tax abatement, commercial and industrial, new construction is eligible for 100% of the improvement for 3 years.
Yes.
So that's an automatic
Yes.
given. However, they can't do both the tax abatement and an urban renewal development agreement or rebate.
Right.
The Kibbe building, when I voted on that, when I was on the council, was for remediation of the water runoff problem that we had in the alley, actually. And it was the way that they
Well,
could
that's a way of
remodel the building, repair it, and then capture the water. And so it really wasn't for new construction, as I recall.
And one of the other
So
things.
do I hear that the people, you're not in favor of helping out new construction downtown? Is that, because
Are you just talking about the facade program?
Yeah, the facade grant
And so, I don't know what area does that just cover the historical district?
Right now, it just covers
The
the
historic
downtown
district.
business area.
So it's basically and this is the funding language, and to be clear, a facade grant is still TIF dollars. Just because it comes in as TIF and we reallocate it elsewhere doesn't make it not TIF dollars.
No, we're not, I don't want it looked at as, because if you put the TIF with it, then it goes under the urban renewal. We don't want it under urban renewal.
And so, so what you're saying is the way the facade grant is currently written is that it will provide funding for long-term preservation of buildings within the central business district and to encourage future economic development within the area. So it's really targeted at what do we have currently.
Yes.
And it's been an incentive grant. A tornado changes everything in
Yes.
terms of stuff.
They're not there now.
Yeah. So what Councilmember Lamer is looking at specifically is not asking for additional funds from the urban renewal area or TIF district, but looking at local option sales tax as a source to put in city dollars outside of that. What I'm saying is you've got to keep everything on the table. Local option sales tax is a limited source of funds. That's, we haven't allocated out everything that you had coming to you in this fiscal year, and we finished last fiscal year with a pretty healthy balance. So you do have some money there. But that's one and done and gone. Whereas tax increment financing is something that is a little bit more of a generating source. So there's definitely all sorts of strategies here where perhaps to keep things on the tax rolls initially, you use local option sales tax to get them on the tax rolls, and then you start to build your incremental tax base a little bit more and use that at the very end. But I will go back to one big point from the downtown master plan, which is that those first projects are going to need a lot and that there's going to be a gap, and that it's really coming back to the city to fill that gap. So I can't say that we really know exactly what we're looking at on some of these projects yet, but we're going to have a better idea in the next 2 months or so. And so those things will come before you here in the near future. And that's where I would encourage you to think about all sources that could be available to make a project happen, and not just one or the other.
Well, the the reason I was thinking about using the tax increment, not the TIF money, was the other source is this tax money that we've collected from people buying stuff here in Marshalltown. And if we can take that money and give it back to a business so that the business stays downtown and it has a nice front on it, we're going to collect more tax money from it because of the value of the business. So we're using tax money from them to build a better tax base for downtown. And, you know, we lost a lot of buildings downtown, so the rehab of buildings downtown, we don't have that many buildings to rehab anymore because we got a lot of them are laying in the rubble. So just my ideas, you guys think I'm nuts, tell me so. Thanks.
If it's something that's on the table now, as we start to put together some of these, financial pictures, I would like to be able to come back to you with some of these where we potentially do have some local option sales tax built in, because it is a revenue source that could be helpful on some of these. And so if that's something that you're open to, I think Councilmember Lamer wanted to designate a specific amount of money to be set aside. I don't know if you need to go that far at this point until we really know sort of what needs look like. But I think this is something where, it's going to be out there. It's going to be something where council participation in these projects is going to need to exist, and it's just figuring out what's the best way to do it.
Well, what I'd like to see is they go ahead and fill out the same applications they fill out as an urban renewal, and when that group decides that it's a new building or that they're not going to fund it, then send it to us and so we could take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're already got the applications filled out. The information's all there that we need. They shouldn't ask them to do it a second time.
So that's where I would say we're getting more information, requiring more information with the Catalyst grant, because it's state funds.
They don't want to ask for a Catalyst grant. I'm just talking about.
Well, that's where we're encouraging everybody to go through the Catalyst grant right now. We'll have a different conversation when those dollars are fully allocated, because that is a finite resource that will be gone at some point. But I think at this point there is an application process set up through the Catalyst grant to basically start that conversation, knowing that those new construction projects are tending to be more pricier. I think every one that we've seen is over $1 million in terms of new construction. I think over 1.3 or 1.2 million versus some of these rehab and renovations that, we're getting that information right now through the Catalyst grant. And I would think that anybody who is thinking about something should be applying for a Catalyst grant for that purpose.
Okay. I don't agree, but that's okay.
So it would be interesting. I'm guessing that like Eder, Olberding, they have like flow charts and like an idea of, okay, if this is a new building, new construction versus rehab, these are the options you have for funding. Like this is what we.
Not if it's new, just rehab.
But there is new because we have tax abatement. So, but there may be other things that are available that we don't know about because we sit up here and we aren't out there.
Yeah, I think the new stuff goes through us.
That's realistically where we are. But it's also, if there was a significant renovation that was in the millions, we'd probably be talking about assistance there as well, potentially outside of the facade grant program. So I think it's a combination. Right now, we're really using the Catalyst grant process as a way to get projects out there and get things sort of in the known area. Part of filing a pre-application is they do have to meet with the Central Business District and Martha Green. So there's some boxes being checked there in terms of making sure that a renovation, if it's in the historic district, is looking at, employing historic design standards and some other things. So once the Catalyst funds are fully allocated, it's still, my email is never full and my phone voicemails are, I'm not overwhelmed with voicemails and things. Like, it's an open door in terms of if you have something that is going to be so significant that the MCBD facade grant can't handle it, there's a conversation that we have on a bigger level that would come back to you ultimately, which is exactly how we get to, the conversation about the Landover project and that they had a gap gap that needed to be filled, brought it to you. You did a resolution of intent to fill it.
I have heard this from 2 different business owners about new construction, that there were not funds available. And so I think it would be helpful if we could find out, after the tornado, there were 2 funds established, one by the Community Foundation, one at MCBD. And it would be good to know what they're being used for, what businesses are eligible for. And that's the stuff that I just don't.
Well, and that's easy enough to answer. I can, from the Community Foundation side, there is no individual help going to businesses. It's only nonprofits and governmental entities that are eligible to apply for that. And Jenny can speak to what the donation funds from, that were given to MCBD were used for.
We were given $78,000 in donations for tornado relief funds. All of that money went to business owners in the downtown, not building owners, but business owners, because we felt that there would be other funds available later on for the building owners, but no one was giving money just to the building owners. So you could be renting a business space, and we would give you money to help you out with getting your windows back in, or getting replenishing some of your products, et cetera. So that's where all of that went. What I do want to point out about the incentive grant is that this was established initially because it's really hard to get financing for these older buildings. It's like buying a used car. Once you get into refurbishing these things, you find out there's no firewall. You find out the plumbing is as old as, the 1900s, early 1900s. So it's really hard to come up with money from bankers that want to bankroll some of these projects. And so we knew, and if you're in the historic district, there's a lot more requirements on building code stuff, on materials you get to use, et cetera. And if you get historic tax credits, that skyrockets the expectation of what you can do with your building. And so we knew that we really needed to help people out in trying to finance these projects if we wanted any of these buildings renovated. So that's why it was established in the first place, because they were in sore need of help. And so, I pointed out before that the turnaround on your investment is amazing. And so people are putting a lot of money into these projects, but they couldn't do it without your help, because these are extensive projects that you just don't know what you're going to get into. And we want to save as many buildings as we can. We're real afraid of the domino effect. You take the one building down and what happens to the others. So saving these buildings is really important. So the grant was written specifically to help these people because there's requirements in the downtown that nobody else in the community has to abide by. So that's why it was established.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this topic?
Do we get an accounting from the Community Foundation on where their money's going and who's getting it?
We do not. We do not give them any funding directly or have any direct relationship other than as a recipient of grants from them.
Was it made aware to the major donors that money would not be available to anybody but just nonprofits when they made that donation?
I think so. My thought was that they were not granting out dollars to businesses prior, and so that's just not how they do things. But as far as what was put out publicly, I don't know. You would need to talk to the Community Foundation about that.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no other comment, let's go on to public comment. Members of the public may make comments on any item that was not on the agenda during this time. Approach the microphone, state your name and address. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes unless I authorize more. The speaker shall direct comments to the mayor and council as a whole, and the mayor and councilors shall not engage in discussion or debate on items raised by members of the public, and no action may be taken on those items in order to comply with the open meetings law. The mic is open. Seeing nobody standing, I will declare the meeting is adjourned at 7:48 p.m. Thank you for coming.